Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to talk about the story of Total War Warhammer. You see, Total War Warhammer does have a story and it's not just linked to the Eye of the Vortex campaign and the Realm of Chaos. There's a bit of an overlapping theme through all the games, and yeah, I think that it's very possible that the recent Immortal Empires launch trailer has kind of hinted of where we will go next. Yeah, I know that sounds a bit weird, but it's actually kind of interesting because it links up to a very beloved setting throughout Warhammer Fantasy, the true end times, and yeah, possibly where we're going to go next. A big thank you to Baron Loyd for actually pointing this out, as he did a post on Reddit, I believe. It's no longer on Reddit, unfortunately, though. So why does this trailer likely point towards where the direction is going? And it's simple. It's just a very small clip.
Storm clouds gather.
That's it. Yeah, I know. It's a small clip, but this is actually the Conclave of Light, which is the meeting place for various factions during an event known as the Storm of Chaos. A campaign which is perhaps, well, not perhaps, it's one of the best campaigns that was ever released by Games Workshop, the original End Times. Not that garbage fanfiction that we ended up getting in 2015. This is actually a coherent story. But yes, this area is actually a meeting place where many factions met to discuss the oncoming hordes of chaos. Volkmar the Grim had just been defeated, and it looks like if people don't band together, the world will actually be destroyed. Here in this actual setting during the Storm of Chaos, you can see Tackless, who also features in the video, a bunch of different elect accounts, a bunch of representatives from the different churches, even the halflings, but not only that. Representatives from Kislev, Bretonnia, the dwarfs, and even Marienburg come down together to discuss the oncoming onslaught. It's silly of me to not have noticed the distinction, considering that I was around during the time of the Storm of Chaos and played that campaign heavily. But yeah, the parallel is there. Obviously there's more races, cafes involved and so on, but keep in mind that cafe was not actually a thing back in the day in the tabletop. So again, thank you Loyd for pointing this out. Now, why is this actually important? Well, time and time again, Creative Assembly have actually denied that we're ever going to go to a end time setting. It's something that they even had to put out in blogs too. You can see that's on screen. This was from a blog like 2 years ago. No end times. No end times. They state here that their primary source is Warhammer Fantasy Battles 8th edition, although we have and will continue to use older editions for inspiration where appropriate. Yeah, it's a big thing here because the end times is a source of drama in just a very light sense to say it, because obviously that is the end of Warhammer Fantasy. That is the end of my precious world, our precious world. Yet the way that the story has been going on for the Total War Warhammer series, many of us did think, yes, the end times are an eventuality. However, there is another timeline. Yeah. You see, the Storm of Chaos was released in 6th edition, and then that story was just never progressed after Chaos lost, because yes, Chaos did lose there. Then they moved on to the new timeline. Mostly focused on 8th edition, as 7th edition was just like bad in general. But a lot of people see it as an alternative timeline, and it's a big question here whether or not an alternate timeline can exist. In fact, in Age of Sigmar, the notion of alternate timelines actually does exist when looking back at the world that was. That's the name that the Warhammer Fantasy world has in there because, I don't know, something something Games Workshop something something. Hell, we already know of other alternate timelines, like for example Warhammer Age of Reckoning. That's something which has its own little thing going on. Unfortunately that MMO is no longer in production, but it had its own timeline. So it's not out of the question that Total War Warhammer could have its own timeline, or in fact is following that of the Storm of Chaos. And there's a big reason why to think of that. Creative Assembly do like going back to 6th edition when it comes to certain things, like for example, if we look at the Shadow and the Blade DLC, the Eshin Triad, the Eshin Sorcerer, all that type of stuff, even the Lore of Magic, the Lore of Stealth, that was all 6th edition stuff. Funny enough, also linked up to the Storm of Chaos campaign, which is a nice little thing. I very heavily appreciate when Creative Assembly go back to perhaps the best edition of Warhammer Fantasy, at least in my opinion, but yeah, a lot of going back there, and it's likely that we're going to see more of that in the future, as there's a lot of units from 6th edition, and there's a lot of factions that could get a lot of Storm of Chaos upgrades. Just for a little example, obviously there is the Halfling army, then obviously the Boris Todbringer Ulrichian army, something that a lot of people actually really do want. The Slayer army from Karak Kadrin, because, well, we need a Slayer DLC, it's been discussed very heavily on this channel before. Then the Cult of Pleasure, a proper hybrid Slanesh demon / Warriors of Chaos / Dark Elf army for Morathi, and a High Elf army for the Lothan Sea Patrol led by Sea Lord Aisling, another character that many of us are already expecting in the future in a DLC. You've heard of these armies before if you watch this channel, because I reference the Storm of Chaos quite often as, yeah, it's actually that good. Now, I know some people would be saying that that wouldn't work because 8th edition is the main timeline, and obviously Storm of Chaos doesn't really follow that, but actually it does. So, where the 8th edition timeline starts is at the start of the reign of Karl Franz. This is what happens when you decide to start a Karl Franz campaign. All the way there is exactly the same story. Some things are very minor changes, and it's only when it starts progressing into the story where obviously then, you know, the divergence comes in. The Storm of Chaos happens, or the End Times happen. So it's still 8th edition, it's just moving to a different timeline, and I think that it's going to be its own unique thing, considering that obviously there's characters alive in the series right now that should be long dead. Characters such as Vlad, Isabella, Rapunzel, and a few others, they should be dead at this point, but they're back. Now we're going to talk about the story of Warhammer 3 and see how that could lead into the Storm of Chaos, as there's already some reason to believe so. Now, keep in mind that we won't really be talking about the DLC stuff, so nothing like the Champions of Chaos or just anything like the race packs, because they kind of do their own thing, which is actually a good thing as it's exploring a lot of different things. The game series will actually go into different storylines just to have a little bit of fun. So we know that the storyline continues through all 3 games, however it's not Game 1, Game 2, Game 3. Rather, Game 3's story, The Realm of Chaos, is first. This is the whole situation with Urson getting trapped by Be'lakor being an absolute failure as usual, and Daniel the Demon Prince showing up, because, yeah, that's a thing now. That campaign gets all done and dusted, and then it moves on to the Eye of the Vortex. So the Winds of Magic are in a bit of a weird situation. The Vortex itself could end up imploding on itself, and yeah, all hell will break loose. There wouldn't be need of an End Times. The Skaven themselves are trying to summon in the Great Horned Rat. The Lizardmen and the High Elves are trying to stop that, which is kind of weird because they end up fighting against each other. And then the Dark Elves, Malekith thinks that that's the key for Ulthuan, which, look, there's a lot of lore inconsistencies when it comes to this game series. Believe me, one day I'll do a video and it will be about an hour long, I think. Now, we know the canon ending for Warhammer 3, which is that Urson is, revived, he's brought back, all the usual stuff. We don't know, I believe, the canon ending for Eye of the Vortex, but it can be assumed that the High Elves won because, yeah, if the Skaven would have won, then all hell would have broken loose. If the Vortex would have been made more unstable, then all hell would have broken loose. And finally, if the Dark Elves would have taken over, there would have been an incredible, massive civil war. Again, all hell would break loose. The Lizardmen, I don't know. They'd probably just go there and then go back to sleep, because that's what Lizardmen do. Now, both of these events are quite massive and start making the Winds of Magic go a little bit strange, which is making the Chaos Gods start getting a little bit active, right? That then takes us to Game 1, where, you know, everyone's just starting off. Karl Franz has just taken over, all the usual stuff, and the threat of chaos comes. This is also in the Mortal Empires, but unfortunately, we have no Chaos Invasion in the Immortal Empires. I'm assuming it's because the factions have been implemented properly there, and, yeah, the actual scenario was just not great, let's be honest there. So every other faction is just doing their own thing. Archaon at that point is gathering all the gifts of the Chaos Gods and obviously massing up his hordes. It's very similar to basically what happens with the End Times. Obviously some storyline has changed, but everything kinda mixes up right until the actual Chaos Invasion, which, yeah, could divert. This is where things start diverting. Now, before we continue and finish off this video, I know a lot of people are saying, well, Immortal Empires is a sandbox campaign, there shouldn't really be a storyline. And yes, I totally agree with you, but what they can do is a little bit of a toggle, which could add in a minor story point. Keep in mind that the Storm of Chaos stuff is just a minor story point. Essentially, it starts, and then it's just a massive chaos invasion. So essentially like an endgame crisis. The forces of chaos start moving down and actually become a threat, like like what happened in Warhammer 1 and then became a bit of a joke in Warhammer 2 Immortal Empires. Which we can also be honest with the fact that Chaos isn't really too much of a threat in Warhammer 3 right now in Immortal Empires, as Archaon just kind of stays up there. The majority of the Chaos factions don't really do much. Kolek is just like playing bounce around in the Mountains of Morn, and yeah, I want to see them a bit more active. I want to see them a bit more dangerous. How cool would it be if at a certain point you would trigger an event and, yeah, a massive amount of Chaos forces start appearing and attacking loads of different people. Here you'd have to have factions join up again. This would be a really good thing to actually see. If they're going to try and go for a monumental end to the series in the future, might as well be Storm of Chaos, then the End Times. Nobody wants to relive that. But now what everyone's been waiting for, I'm assuming, is how Storm of Chaos would affect us in terms of new content, because I know some people would be thinking, wait, what's going to happen with, say, for example, the Vermin Lords, or other End Times units that people are expecting, like Putrid Blight Kings, Wrathmongers, Skull Reapers, all the really cool stuff. Well, Vermin Lords were a thing from prior to the End Times. The only thing is it's a new model, and it's kind of like how old models for Slaanesh were not used, and instead they used the Age of Sigmar variant, so that's perfectly fine. We will get the new version if they end up coming, because it just makes sense. Plus, we do already have a lot of End Time / Age of Sigmar type of models. It's not just Slaanesh or the Skaven, but it's a few things like Archon the Black and so on. In terms of all the new stuff, like Putrid Blight Kings and so on, they could have easily existed during the Storm of Chaos timeline, because, plots, and Games Workshop could just say, oh yeah, no, they always existed, right? It's how magically we have squats back in 40k. Yeah, they're called the Leagues of Votann, and they're pretty much all clones, but it's still the same thing. Yeah, they always existed. They didn't get wiped out. So we'll be able to get all the cool stuff from the End Times just without having to think, oh god, this is where it's ending. We're not going to be able to stop it. Here we'll still be able to make our own ending. If we don't want to cause the End Times, we don't cause it. Dedicated faction reworks are a massive thing that could potentially happen, as, again, the Karak Kadrin army, if we get a proper Slayer army, so Ungrim would play very radically different to all the other dwarfs. Morathi getting her update that she rightfully deserves. Yeah, she got a nice little uptune here, but no, she needs this. She desperately needs this. Archaon possibly getting his 4 lieutenants as legendary heroes, which would be kind of cool. Could you imagine if you get to a certain point of souls spent, you end up getting your 4 lieutenants? Because, yeah, they wouldn't really fit as legendary lords, but having 4 dedicated heroes just to Archaon would be kind of cool. Granted, this doesn't really need to follow a Storm of Chaos storyline, but it kind of just fits, and really, again, none of us want to follow that garbage over the End Times, so yeah. Nagash doesn't really show up in the Storm of Chaos, but that doesn't matter, considering that, Rapance is alive and all that type of stuff. The idea is he could still come in. Characters such as Valten would already be here anyway, because this is when he got originally introduced. But the main thing is, this would serve as a way not to remind us of the End Times constantly, which is something that Games Workshop themselves can't even do. Hell, even with Warhammer the Old World post, they go, oh yeah, remember the End Times still happen. And ideally, as Warhammer Fantasy fans, those of you just like me who have been in the tabletop for a long, long time, who love the lore and so on, yeah, we don't want to be reminded constantly. So if we go through a Storm of Chaos story, that is avoided. Plus, there's loads of really cool things in the Storm of Chaos that could be added in. In general, just a lot of really cool plot points, characters, and so on. And let's be honest, if we're not going to get the End Times, even though if we might not want it or not, there needs to be a end type of storyline, doesn't there? There needs to be a proper, this is a big thing. The Storm of Chaos is probably the biggest one, as that gives you the option. There was the option there if Chaos won or not, and yeah, Chaos lost. Leave it open rather than having a set ending. That's all I'm saying. I don't know, maybe I'm looking too much into this again, but yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. It's just something that I've been thinking about it ever since the whole Conclave of Light thing was pointed out, as it's just a very specific thing, and we do know that Creative Assembly do like to do little hints in trailers and so on. It's just something that's been happening for the past, God knows how many years this series has been going on. It's actually quite a long-standing series. Yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion, and have a great day, guys. Have a good weekend. I'll see you all again very, very soon.